the guy running the ceremony was like, well, I'd like to have the elder person here say a prayer for everybody and talk. And it was just a silence. And everybody was waiting for me to say something. And I just thought that was pretty funny.
And you were wondering who the old man was.
Yeah, I was wondering who the old man was.
I'm here today with Travis Renville. Travis is the chairman of a district up for the Sisseton Wahpeton Sioux tribe up in the northeastern corner of South Dakota. And Travis and I have known each other for probably going on about 15 years now. So welcome to the cast, Travis.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's probably a little bit longer than that. Probably almost 20. I think it was in around 03 or 04 that we first met.
Actually, you're right, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of come a long way. I just noticed how white my hair is on the cameras.
I've got the salt and pepper beard too, so we're both showing our age.
Yeah, I guess it does bring some wisdom, and people are tending to believe me nowadays.
Right.
They come to me. Actually, we were sitting in a ceremony a couple months ago, and the guy running the ceremony was like, well, I'd like to have the elder person here say a prayer for everybody and talk. And it was just a silence. And everybody was waiting for me to say something. And I just thought that was pretty funny.
And you were wondering who the old man was.
Yeah, I was wondering who the old man was. And it turned out it was me. And everybody was waiting on me. So, yeah. And then, I guess reconnecting with you, Mark, and there was a gap there, where, I was living in New Mexico and raising a family and working in healthcare and going back to school and furthering my education. It actually kind of brought me a different perspective on, the work you were doing when I first met you and the tools available. So I guess now is a good time. And now being back home and coming back after 20 some years being away from Minnesota and the Dakotas in my tribe, it just gives a whole new fresh perspective on a lot of different things. Initially I think we met talking about economic development and doing projects or doing business deals, but it seems to be it's changed quite a bit for me, and I think even for you, now having a family and having your first son, things are, I think, more mission orientated, or they seem more wholesome, really. Money's just one part of it, doing the deals, one part of it, financing, I guess that just comes with age and wisdom too.
Well, no doubt. So the something you talk about is the change of perspective and things, and family has something to do with that, of course, and the age and wisdom that we talk about have something to do with that. But something that's been kind of key in a changing of our perspective lately is we've had a chance to travel together internationally, and that brought us on a trip over to Italy, and we got to go visit Rome together. And one of the things on your bucket list there was to go to the Vatican, so we got to go there together.
Yeah, amazing. So when I did my undergrad here at University of Minnesota, part of it was in Renaissance history. So had an amazing teacher for Renaissance art history, happened to be Native American, actually, from Michigan. She was from a Michigan tribe, I believe. And she was a tough teacher. But I like those kind of teachers, that hold you accountable like that. And but she was very thorough, and I just became so fascinated by just the detail and the artwork and the whole process of all those masters, from buildings to art to science to trade, that they brought in Italy, and then studying different folks in history classes from the Renaissance period. Plutarch and Leonardo, of course, the big names like that. It was always a dream of mine to go to Italy and walk the land and experience that whole thing then you graduate school, you start work, and you start raising a family, and that stuff kind of gets lost. And just like that, your
It
hair's
becomes
white.
just a theory in the back of your mind until you can go and
Yeah,
experience it like we did.
yeah, and it was kind of a last minute thing, and that was awesome just to go over there and actually. It was a game changer for me as far as perspective, and I also kind of relate that Renaissance period that Italy went through to the Renaissance period that I think that's unfolding with me and with my work in tribal communities. And we're kind of in that period now and have been over the last probably 20 some years, kind of coming from the dark ages, if you want to say, where there was a tradition and then coming into this new area, and then how it's really fast forwarding now with all the technology out there, and even doing things like this, having podcasts and streaming to worldwide audiences, fascinating to me.
It is. It's, growth and changes are fascinating things, and I think I'm a believer that we should all embrace them and take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
So something I thought was interesting, some dialogue that you and I had along that trip is we started talking about the connection, in visiting the Vatican, the connection between the Roman Catholic Church and some of the fairly recent history that happened among Native American tribes. As the white man came over to, and the English came over to populate the North American continent. Obviously, the people that were here were your people, the Native American tribes, and part of that whole story is the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with colonization of Europeans to America, or what Native Americans actually call North America's Turtle Island, and if you've ever seen a representation of the shape of North America and an overlap of a turtle, it comes pretty obvious why the native people called it Turtle Island. So America is not necessarily the right word for us. I guess indigenous or native. And I usually say I'm native or indigenous to Minnesota sometimes rather than using American Indian or Native American when people ask me who I am and where I come from. But yes, the Roman Catholic Church, a lot of the foundational colonialization premise was revolved around papal bulls about um, doctrine of discovery. Doctrine of discovery was used as a mechanism, really, that, well, if they're not Christians, if they're not Roman Catholic, we basically can wipe them out and take all their land and resources. Um, and I think that was a foundational premise that haunts us to this day. And to go to the place where that papal bull was probably written in the Vatican or in that
Or
area.
certainly influenced among the people at the Vatican.
Yeah. And then our experience going over there, and what was so fascinating to me going over there, there was a couple different things, but the one was when we walked through that cartography hall, and you could see
I
some of the.
remembered it was a very long haul, but
Yeah,
it told a very interesting story.
yeah, it was cartography from actually all over the world. But you could see as you walk down the hallway the progression of European explorers that drew the certain maps, and you could see the progression as it came across from the eastern shores of Turtle Island to Minnesota here, and then even where my ancestors were probably dwelling. And we kind of joked about it a little bit, but it was so true in a lot of ways. Like, see those areas over there? We got to get there. We got to map it, and we got to figure out somehow how to get it away from the people that are already there. And those papal bulls were part of that doctrine of discovery back then.
And of course, the Europeans that were here thought that was a great tool to use to help in some of the colonization that they were aiming to do.
Yeah. The other thing that fascinated me so much about being in the Vatican and more so than Rome proper. If you ever go there, I guess you could understand. Vatican is in itself, to me, and again, it's considered one of the first governments, recognized in their own, I guess, city state type of thing. Um, but I could see the wealth that went into head to toe, the wealth that was brought from around the earth to Rome and to the Vatican. Just the opulence and the detail of the sculptures and the detail of the carvings and tapestries was just amazing to me. And that was the first thing I noticed when walking through there. I was like, wow. And it wasn't just Native Americans. You could tell there was other places from around the world, the influences that they brought to Rome there into the Vatican.
Sure. Well, it's the Catholic Church is a large, all encompassing place all around the earth at this point. So they've drawn from many other societies and many other countries. I think something that's intriguing too about the Vatican in a parallel is that it's a sovereign entity within another country, and there are very few examples of that around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them are Native American reservations.
Right, right. And so, again, me just knowing you, Mark, and having conversations and taking those trips and sitting in cars or sitting in museums and all that, wouldn't it be awesome for the tribes of North America to establish diplomatic relations with the sovereign Vatican, um, exercising our sovereignty as tribes with the original Vatican that helped kind of get us to where we're at as tribes, and kind of reversing that whole 500 years of colonialism that started there, and maybe even hitting, my brother likes to say, hitting the reset button.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe hitting the reset button, starting diplomatic relations with the Vatican, having a place there where we could get our needs expressed to them, because they have a far reaching, not only here to North America, but to South America and indigenous people around the world. I think we could tell a really good story nowadays of what we went through, how we got through it, how we survived, how devastating it was when you talk about boarding schools and to our culture and our language, um, and how we could fix that, going forward, especially with this new pope coming in, who's from Chicago.
Right. It does seem like a unique and maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to really pursue this idea with a new regime of pope coming in, with someone that can identify with the Turtle Island, as you say, and but really also it takes your ability to communicate what some of the mutual benefits could be to the church too.
Sure. One fascinating thing is the Catholic Church had canonized a saint. Her name was Kateri Tekakwitha. I believe she was a Seneca ancestry, and I happen to have Seneca ancestry in me as well. And growing up where I grew up in Sisseton, South Dakota, the church and the nursing home and all those things were called Tekakwitha. Growing up there, but we never knew the story behind it and why and who she was or anything like that. But I think it was probably within the last 20 years. I'm not sure what pope. And again, I'm not Catholic myself, but I do have family members. My sisters are strong Catholic, Roman Catholic church members. But 20 years ago, I believe she's the only Native American or indigenous saint canonized by the church. And I just thought that would be a good way, or she could potentially be a conduit. Her work that she did, whatever it was, 100 years ago, and the work that we could potentially bring now and use Kateri, her work could be through Kateri Tekakwitha's mission back to the current pope now. I think that was one way we could relate in a common ground, but then start working all these other issues like
Sure.
How do we get our land back? How do we get our resources back? How do we establish trade? Different things like that. How do we repair, honestly, the devastation, the trauma, the historical trauma? And that it's a real thing. I never used to think that was real until I got older and started having my own problems. But it all went back to um, my great grandparents getting taken away by the church and putting into boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do we heal that? It could be through Kateri Tekakwitha's mission, canonized saint by the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be a very interesting storyline. So you mentioned that you think that this woman who became a saint or was canonized was from Seneca tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the Senecas
New
generally
York,
based?
New York, around the Great Lakes, primarily in present day New York, and I guess that would be Ontario, Ohio, some of those types of areas. Some of them were displaced. Um, Most of them were put into boarding schools, a place called Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Um, I don't think that was necessarily ran by the Catholic Church at that time, but many boarding schools were ran by Episcopals and different
Denominations.
denominations. Yeah. Um, my Seneca family was relocated to Carlisle, met my Omaha family, fell in love in Carlisle while they're in boarding school, left, and ended up in Nebraska.
Oh.
The Senecas were my great grandmother comes from, were relocated from New York to Grove, Oklahoma. Seneca tribe of Oklahoma is what they're now known as well. And of course, the story behind everybody knows the story about that. A lot of Eastern tribes were displaced and put into Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma, of course.
I would argue that not enough people know about this.
Yeah, yeah,
How that
yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you kind of hear a little bit about it when you're going through kindergarten through 12th grade. You probably don't hear about that displacement or these issues really until maybe you go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what college and what you take there, you may not hear about it ever, really. We see
Well,
some depictions in Hollywood and stuff, but that doesn't tell the real story.
right. That's a Hollywoodized story so
Yeah.
often.
It looks cool. It looks cool, even to me. And it looks pretty cool. The guys on horseback back then, and they always just seem to depict the Lakotas or the Dakotas, anyways, which is where I'm at now. But it's my truck. But it's
So
Hollywood is Hollywood.
so let's think about this idea of diplomatic relations. So what would that look like in your mind?
Oh wow, that's yeah. So Mark, you know me. I think things through very pragmatically. The first step would be recognition from my tribe, or what's called the Oche-Tishikowi. It's the seven council fires of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people. It would be getting some recognition, maybe grassroots level, me being the chairman of my district, which is one of seven districts of the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Oyate, getting some sort of resolution passed, formally documenting that we want to establish diplomatic relations, and then from there going to the other districts, getting their support, and then going to our tribal council and our tribal executives, chairman, vice chair, lady, and our secretary. That would be a really good start because our tribe is a sovereign nation, guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution by treaty. That would be a good start, and then I would think perhaps reaching out to somebody local here in the U.S. I don't. I know they're set up, organized. The Catholic Church is organized in a certain way.
With like archdioceses
Yeah,
and
with
things like that.
archdiocese, and then I'm sure there's an American one,
Mm.
and maybe starting there, and then what would be really helpful though is having somebody on the Vatican side of this as well, of where we're going with this, even if we could get it to the Pope and potentially get it on his agenda or his radar, and coming up with a well drafted document on formal recognition and establishing them. Probably have to get some lawyers involved, of course, or some
There's always
diplomats.
lawyers involved.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would be a good start. We wouldn't need anybody else's authorization. We wouldn't need the U.S. president. We wouldn't need a state governor or anything. We could do this on our own, and at least start that initiative and see where it
And build
goes.
those alliances, right?
Yeah, but it would be really helpful to have somebody in Rome from being there, having an apartment there. That would be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And approaching it from that angle locally in Rome and from the Vatican would be a good way to go as well. And then just I think what would be awesome too is probably start some mutual tourism, having them come, a delegation from the Vatican or even the city of Rome
Mm-hmm.
or Italy come to our tribe or the Midwest here and visit us and see what we're about.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be awesome as well, I think.
So as this idea evolves, are you envisioning that um, that a group of tribes would essentially have a diplomatic relations, or individual tribes would have diplomatic
Well,
relations?
getting one or more tribes together in my career has been always been difficult. But on something like this, we could take it to, let's say, the 9 tribes of South Dakota. There's a couple other organizations I think that are already doing that are basically all the tribes in the country, in the United States anyway, that have organized, say, the National Congress of American Indians. Not all tribes are with that, but a good share of them, just a majority of them, pretty much. I think they already have diplomatic relations with the UN. I don't know if they've gone beyond that from the UN to, say, the Vatican.
Yeah.
I know they bring it up quite a bit when they go to the end, the Doctrine of Discovery and getting formal apologies and things like that. And those are all good things. Um,
But you're essentially describing a different tactic
yeah,
to
exactly.
yeah.
And then there's another one that I would probably approach because my brother is now the chairman of that, and that's the Coalition of Large Tribes. Those are a variety of tribes from around the United States that are the large land-based tribes,
Mhm.
and
So by large tribes, generally large land bases.
yeah, in large populations.
Mm.
Large. I think there's some requirements. It might be 100 or 200,000 acres or something, and
Mm.
10 or 20,000. I don't know quite the details of tribal members. They've organized themselves in over the last probably 10 to 15 years, and they're to me they're more the grassroots tribes, and some of the smaller tribes might get mad at me. But we do have smaller tribes actually joining as associate members in the the Coalition of Large Tribes right now. But we tend to be the ones that have kept a lot of our culture and our language and our ties to the land. And I might get in trouble for some of that, but that's what I'm seeing right now. And we tend to be treaty tribes as well, and we really lean on that treaty as far as government to government relations with the U.S. federal government. But approaching one of them would be probably key as well. And then each individual tribe is sovereign here in the United States. They could actually do
Take their
something
own
like this on
initiatives if
their
they
own,
want. Sure.
and maybe we create the blueprint here and create that conduit
Sure.
with perhaps our own embassy there.
Well,
So
and that's following a traditional entrepreneurial mindset, as someone has to
yeah,
be the pioneer,
yeah.
and
The other way
and
though.
right, exactly, and break ground, and then you get buy-in and whatnot.
Yeah. I think that would help. That would having diplomatic relations with the Vatican would strengthen our sovereignty. And whether that tribe has a treaty or not, maybe they can make a new treaty This time we make it with the Vatican, but we put things in there that are more favored towards us rather than the other way around.
Because this time you actually do have layers.
Yeah, exactly. We do have lawyers. We have diplomats. We understand the resources we have now, and then the protections. The protections this time around as well. Trying to address some of that trauma, like I said, that historical trauma with some real actionable healing.